After an absolute, and I mean absolute, snooze fest of a winter meetings this past week in Orlando, a lot remains uncertain for the direction of the 2026 Chicago Cubs, specifically where they go this offseason. And you know what? Let's talk about it. You're watching Second City Sports Talk. Now, I talked about it on my Twitter. I had a tweet that blew up actually, and it was about the question of Kyle Tucker. And Buster Olney, one of the top ESPN insiders, went on to a baseball podcast and basically said, hey, there's doubt that Kyle Tucker is going to receive this mega deal that that we all thought he was going to get entering 2025. There really isn't a suitor out there who's willing to give in and give him what he demands. You know, the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, they just aren't entertained to give Kyle Tucker this mega deal. The Blue Jays seem to be the only true suitor right now who is willing to meet his demands, but he hasn't signed there yet, so there's no telling to say they have come up to what Kyle Tucker wants. So right now, this situation is very fluid. We don't know what Kyle Tucker is going to do, yet the Cubs really aren't involved. And make no mistake, the skeptics to Kyle Tucker do have reasonable suspicion to be worried about giving him a mega contract. Tucker's injury prone. He only played in the 136 games this past year. Remember, he suffered a hairline fracture in his hand sliding into second base against the Reds at the end of May. He did play through the injury, did have his best month of the season in June, but shortly after, his mechanics came out of whack and he just wasn't the same hitter. You know, if there really isn't going to be this market that materializes for Kyle Tucker, you would expect a team like the Cubs to swoop in on that high annual average value contract, short years, just go in and try to get him again. You know, Kyle Tucker was a key anchor point on this team. As of now, the Cubs are nowhere near close to bringing him back. Craig Counsell almost basically said Kyle Tucker wasn't going to come back. The chances are very low. But if he's not going to get this long-term deal, why not swoop in, give him a short-term deal, give him $35 million a year and bring him back? Because without Kyle Tucker, this offense is just not the same. You know, switching gears, the Cubs actually did make a signing this week, albeit it's not who you thought. After being a Cubs target last offseason, Hoby Milner has signed the Blue Ink with the Cubs to a one-year, $3.75 million contract. And look, this is not a sexy addition, but he screams Cubs. He is a high ground ball pitcher. He throws a lot of strikes, has a 6.5 career walk rate. That is elite. Only walked 21 a season ago with Texas. Had a 3.84 ERA in 70 innings pitched. He is very durable. He's going to go out there, throw 70, 80 innings a year. He's not going to walk guys, and he is a lefty specialist. He is a side-arming, funky left-handed pitcher. Fastball is not going to blow you away, but he is going to be in there for a pocket of lefties. You know, Caleb Thielbar, Drew Pomerantz. The chances of both of those guys returning in 2026 is very low. Hoby Milner is a guy to fill that void. He is not an elite reliever. He is a middle-of-the-pack guy. He's going to get those middle innings of relief, but very important signing. He is going to get those lefties out when you need him to. And hey, he has a connection to Craig Counsell. He was with Counsell back in Milwaukee from 2021 to 2023. Counsell knows him well. The Cubs did talk about, Craig Counsell did talk about at the winter meetings, how this team got the bullpen wrong in April for like the third or fourth consecutive year. Over the past years, this is just something Jed Hoyer has never been able to get right. And you know what? Hoby Milner, that is a step in the right direction. You still need your lockdown relievers. Right now, it's Daniel Palencia, Phil Maton, who we can't forget the Cubs signed, and Hoby Milner. You know, there needs to be another impactful, high leverage arm added to this bullpen before we can sing Kumbaya and really say they have gotten the bullpen right. Of course, Hoby Milner is just a step in the right direction. He is now one of two Cubs major league signings, him and Phil Maton. And look, Cubs convention is coming up. It is the quote-unquote unofficial start to the season for the Cubs. That's coming up on January 16th. And look, there is still money to spend for the Cubs. They have about $49, 50-ish million to the first luxury tax tier, which has been this team's de facto salary cap. Of course, it shouldn't be that way. You're the Cubs, you're the third biggest market in baseball. Money to spend, we will see where they go with it, but we have to address the elephant in the room. It did come out during the winter meetings. Justin Steele, his health, is a big concern for the Cubs heading into 2026. Craig Counsell basically said he's not going to be ready for opening day and will be available at some point in the first half, which makes you think it's going to be toward late May, early June. 60, 70 games are going to go by before the Cubs get their ace back. And if that's the case, this team needs at least 2 meaningful starting pitching additions, and we're going to talk about that in just a sec. As it currently stands, in the absence of Justin Steele, this is the Chicago Cubs rotation. You have Matthew Boyd, phenomenal year, got fatigued at the end, he won't admit it, is pitching in the World Baseball Classic, which is a bit of a concern. He threw a lot of innings in 2025, and now he's going to throw even more in 2026. I don't like that. You have Jameson Taillon, Mr. Consistency with the Cubs after his turbulent 2023 season. You have, of course, Cade Horton, who should have won Rookie of the Year. Like I said, who knows what you're going to get out of him as well. Very high upside. We saw it in the second half of 25. You have Colin Ray, who was an absolute find by Jed Hoyer. I remember when people were complaining about this signing last year. Great signing. Took Justin Steele's spot in the rotation and just rode with it for the rest of the season. Great find right there. You have Shota Imanaga, who's back after taking the qualifying offer. And then you have some combination of Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown, and Javier Assad. Those are your starting pitcher options currently on the Cubs. We need to add at least 2 more to that number to feel comfortable heading into the season. As far as starting pitcher additions in free agency goes, there's about 5 true options for the Cubs. You have 2 lower-end targets, then you have your 3 expensive options. Now, the 2, I would say, lower-end guys that still do have high upside are Michael King and Zach Gallen. Michael King had an injury-riddled 2025 season, but has some of the best stuff out of these pitchers. High strikeout pitcher. He's not going to blow you away with velocity, but good strikeout numbers. Funky stuff, funky arm angle, is going to slice and dice you up. He is one of the most hyped up pitchers. I know Lance Brazdowski loves him, a guy who contributes to the marquee. Love his stuff. You should go check him out. And then you have Zach Gallen. Now, Gallen was rumored and actually was said to be signing with the Cubs by Bob Nightingale, but obviously we know that wasn't true. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Gallen. Horrific season in 2025. His numbers have gone down every year since 2023. If you're going to add a guy like Zach Gallen, there has to be a bigger move. He can be your B starting pitcher addition, whereas Michael King could be your A move. But if you're going with Zach Gallen, there needs to be something bigger because as he is right now, he's not going to cost a lot, but his upside just isn't as high as some of these other guys. Now, getting toward the deep end of the starting pitching market, an area that the Cubs do not often operate in, you have 3 names. You have Framber Valdez, you have Ranger Suarez, and you have Tatsuya Amai. Totally butchered that name. Those are your 3 quote-unquote big starting pitcher names in free agency. And look, Framber Valdez, I think he is definitely going to price his way out of the Cubs' range. You had that whole incident, the whole cross-up incident. There's questions about his character, about his stamina, his morale on the mound. He would still be a great get for this team, would slot in nicely around Cade Horton, and whenever Justin Steele comes back. You have Ranger Suarez, a just known playoff pitcher. He is going to come through when the lights are the brightest. Again, I think he's going to price his way out of the Cubs' range. You have teams like Baltimore as well, who, are going to force bidding wars for starting pitchers, and the Cubs just don't do that. They are never going to win a bidding war. They want to get a guy at their price. You then have Amai, and if you look at his strikeout numbers in Japan, they aren't going to wow you. But you have to remember the NPB is a contact-oriented league. Around a 25% strikeout rate, that's what Amai had in Japan. Go to the US, where it really is a boomer-bust league, you're going to see a lot more whiffs, and that should translate nicely. But that is the question that scouts are asking. Will Amai's tools, will his high fastball, high velo stuff in Japan translate to the major leagues? And I do think the Cubs think it will. As far as the contract goes, it's rumored to be around, he's going to get around 5 years, 150-ish million. I think the Cubs would do that. There really aren't many other true suitors that want to pony up. Maybe the Mets, but this offseason's been pretty lackluster for that team. I know their fans are quite upset with how David Stearns is running the show, but I do think if the Cubs target Amai, if they believe his stuff will translate from the NPB, like I said, high fastball guy, could pair nicely with Cade Horton at the top, two hard-throwing righties, and I think the Cubs will take a chance on him, and it could really pay off. Now, as far as trading for a starting pitcher, the route that I'll explain in a second is where I think the Cubs are going to go. It's the same three names that were popping up in July: Joe Ryan, Mackenzie Gore, and Edward Cabrera. Now, if you do remember in July, the Cubs were in on Mackenzie Gore, but Washington wanted Matt Shaw in return. You go back to the near Jesus Luzardo deal last offseason, and the Marlins wanted Owen Casey. Who's to say any of that's changed? And that is the issue if you're the Cubs. If you were going to trade for one of these young, controllable arms, remember Cabrera has 3 years, Gore has 2 years, you're going to have to pony up and give up a player you want. And the issue with that is for this current Cubs team is that they're going to go with the kids. They're letting the kids play. You have to presume that Owen Casey is going to either be starting in right field or at DH in 2026. Moises Ballesteros, he had a great month of September. You're going to expect him to be out there on opening day as well. Matt Shaw is your third baseman. If you trade one of these guys and don't get a substitute on offense, you're really putting this team into a bind. And are you really getting any better? I don't think you are. You have to be very conscious when you're making these trades of thinking about the future of this team outside of pitching. If you trade Matt Shaw, if you trade Moises Ballesteros, who is going to be playing those positions in 2026 and beyond? Which is why I think if the Cubs are going to trade for a young, controllable starting pitcher, they're going to have to sign Alex Bregman. I think it's a tug-of-war situation. If the Cubs are going to sign Alex Bregman, they have to trade for a starting pitcher. And if they're going to trade for a starting pitcher, they have to sign Alex Bregman. Think about it. If you trade one of your controllable bats for a starting pitcher, there's going to be a void in the offense, specifically if you trade Matt Shaw. Miles Mastrobuoni isn't here to save the day. Someone has to play third base, and if you're going to trade Matt Shaw, it basically has to be Alex Bregman. And chances are, if you're going to trade for a controllable starting pitcher, you're going to have to trade Matt Shaw. Now, the other end of it is losing Kyle Tucker is huge to this offense. And bringing in a guy like Alex Bregman helps fill the void left by Tucker's departure. Also, if you look at the Cubs' contract situations, after this season, after 2026, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, and Nico Hoerner are all off the books. They're free agents. Chances are all three of those guys will not be back in 2027. And adding a guy like Alex Bregman will help fill that void come 27, but will also fill the void on offense in 2026. I do think the Cubs signing Alex Bregman and trading for a controllable starting pitcher is their preferred mode of action this offseason. But look, a lot still stands in the way from this happening. Yes, the public suitor list for Alex Bregman may be quite small right now. It's the Cubs, the Tigers, the incumbent Red Sox, and the Mariners, which their name might only be in there because Scott Boras is trying to create leverage. And to me, the battle is between the Cubs and Red Sox, but I do think the Red Sox have a bit of a leg up. Why do I think Boston is the favorite? First of all, they're the incumbent. Bregman just played for Boston in 2025. They also need another bat in their lineup. They cannot afford to lose Alex Bregman. Pete Alonso signing with the Orioles too. That's another factor. Another team in the division getting better. Boston knows it needs a bat, and letting Alex Bregman walk without bringing in a bat that is equal to him or even better would be catastrophic. Well, Boston knows it needs a bat like Alex Bregman, but according to an executive, an anonymous executive, Boston does not believe in long-term contracts. Very similar to the Cubs. Why is that? Craig Breslow was in Jed Hoyer's front office before taking the job in Boston. Both teams are very similar. They're almost parallel if you look at their history over the last 3 to 4 years. do not spend big money in free agency, get their players via trade, and just not spend to the capital their franchises are worth. They're both historic teams. Boston has had more success, of course, in the last 20 years, but they're both very similar financials, yet they do not spend to their level that they should be spending at. At the same time, the Cubs are not going to win a bidding war for Alex Bregman. If Boston does not sign or trade for another impact position player besides Bregman, they're going to have to go after Bregman, and they will outbid the Cubs. Which means the only scenario where the Cubs land Alex Bregman is if Boston adds an impact bat other than Bregman. If the Red Sox do trade for a player like Ketel Marte or add another impact bat, I think the Cubs' plan, like I said, of signing Bregman and trading for a controllable starting pitcher will go through. If Boston doesn't sign Bregman, I think it's the Cubs' battle to lose. I think they will get their guy, and they will go through with their plan, add that starting pitcher via trade, and they will be set heading into 2026. I also think people need to understand this. We are still very much early in the offseason. We aren't even to New Year's yet. There are people saying the Cubs are not going to do anything else besides sign 2 middle-of-the-pack relievers. This team knows they need to add another starting pitcher. They know the bullpen is still a priority. They are not just going to go into 2026 with over $40 million to the first luxury tax and not do anything. There are going to be moves coming. We just have to be patient.